is not the Marburg. It is not the Zaire strain. It is not the Ivory Coast strain. It is, how should I say it is a derivation of those, but the lack of hemorrhaging and the lackadaisical approach to dealing with body fluids should be the biggest red flag in the world. So when you see guys offloading Ebola patients, you probably saw that, George, and then an ambulance crew standing around basically with their hands in their pocket. I think there were 6 people. It's like this. It's like giving a lecture to people about not putting flammable liquids in their garage after their whole house is burned down, and giving them a good citizens award for listening to class that they should have taken before the house burned down.
Stephen Quayle with us for a couple hours. We'll be back with more as we talk about.
If you had to pick any state, if you hated it because it has the strength of character that Texas has, and all those things, ask yourself this: why Texas when some of the East Coast cities, especially the airports, have way more population? It's almost, and I'll say this, and I'd say this to Governor Perry, if he wants to call in, I'd say, you've got to see your state has been targeted. Obviously, the closest to the border, we've got one group, the World Health Organization is totally contradicting the Center for Disease Control, and you and I have talked over the years about motive and profit. If I got to tell you something, if the strain that has released is a patented strain and the only people that have access to it, then that's more than a shame on them. That would be a crime against humanity. That would be a war crime. It would be punishable by the world court. So I'm telling people this, that there are answers and the obvious lies that are coming out. Gee, it's not, it's airborne, and I listened to your guest previously. Human semen carries the active pathogen for 90 days, and that the story about staying for up to 4 days, that's proven it can stay almost indefinitely.
Jeez.
The weaponization is what we're talking about.
Steve, I want to talk when we come back from the break about ISIS, but let's wrap up by finishing on this Ebola situation. What about this new respiratory virus that is affecting children all around the country? It's called enterovirus 68.
Yep, enterovirus 68, I'm sorry. The point being is that I believe it is also a weaponized version. I think we've said this on your show before, but you can take any genetic marker and target that for a specific bioweapon by targeting specific protein levels, specific cellular structure, and now I think it's in 46 states. So what I believe is going on, and I believe that had these gentlemen and women not been assassinated, they'd be the ones saying, wait a minute, this is who's doing it. And again, it's, the important part is simply this: until people grow up and demand the truth and say, we're tired of this. Dave Hodges has done a wonderful job in putting it out there, and these guys deserve credit. Mike Adams, others, Doug Hagman, they're saying, look at what's going on, look at the train, and look who has the most to gain. Bottom line was language culture. He's absolutely correct. And what we have is basically an administration that's so politically out of touch. And ever since 9/11 set everything into play. I'm not going to discuss that. People have discussed it, and my feeling is obviously this, that false flag sets the stage for the next coming false flag. I think it's important for people to understand this, that as our political piranhas on the Potomac of self-indulgence, known as the Congress and the Senate, political piranhas on the Potomac of self-indulgence, basically argue away and put this study or that study into place. We have now a new vulnerability that quite candidly can't be dealt with. You probably saw the stories, and if the Coast listeners don't know this, as of, I think, a couple weeks ago, there may be 19 beds. This is critical because it has to do with ISIS. 19 beds that can deal with biologically, and I'm talking about setup already. They can do mateship, and the military can too, but that's not very many beds that can handle people that come down with diseases on a BSL-4 level infection. The point being is this, is that ISIS has talked about, as others have talked about, intentionally infecting individuals and bringing them into the United States. And with open borders, quite candidly, we're asking for it. So I would ask the question again, is there any semblance of sanity? Is there any semblance of common sense? Or is it more obvious now than anyone that there is a plan to literally overwhelm the medical system in this country? And by the way, I've talked to doctors, physicians, nurses. They email me day in and day out, and they're leaving. And like even Dr. S said on Doc Hagman's show, how many doctors, when they're faced with overwhelming patients and nothing to treat the patients, could even stay in that environment? Unfortunately, my major concern, and I talked about this on a show with you, I think almost 7 or 8 years ago, I don't remember exactly the time, but it was a show we were talking about the whole idea of using biological warfare to basically destroy the country from within. We've got now people, and this is where post listeners must apply this. The minute they catch one guy who's infected and who's carrying the black flag, I'm not talking just the Black Death, but the black flag of ISIS or whatever, what's that going to do? And I still maintain that it's obvious that Texas is an intentional target due to its freedom, due to its history, due to everything. Whether you love it, well, and I happen to think Texans are some of the most amazing people in the world, and historically they have a history of fighting for freedom. It's I believe, a multi-pronged attack upon Texas because obviously they have the largest border, and I believe that you're seeing now the intentional overwhelming of the medical system. People will take their children out of schools. I cannot validate this, but I believe that Doug Hagman had someone call in and say, a trucker called in and said, if this Ebola thing doesn't get under control, or maybe said, and I got it on my text message, that truckers now are talking about they're not going into Dallas because of the situation. The point is that then you go to Frisco, Texas, and before coming on the air with you, George, talking to people on the phone, I mean, it's like night and day. Literally, they're talking now about Galveston and a whole floor in a certain Galveston hospital. I'm unfamiliar with Galveston or its hospitals, and all I do is put this stuff out there, not to cause fear. Here's my basic premise. I do what I do and write what I write so that people can understand what's going on. They can take precautions. But if it blindsides them, it's just like getting hit in the head with a baseball bat from behind. Should you live, that's when you go, gee, I wish I would have seen that coming. I think over the years, and thank you so much for letting me come on, and Lisa, and share with people the nature of the threat. We are approaching a very, very dangerous time, and there are people on record that want to destroy billions of people. In my opinion, has been effectively destroyed, and I don't think people can put two and two together. A quarantine or a time of self-imposed isolation is going to be mandatory. There will come a time when sports events will not take place. There will come a time, and I'm talking soon, okay? I'm not talking years, okay? I'm talking months. The last place anybody will want to be is in a crowd, and I believe the intentional delay in initiating real protocols is in order to enable these diseases, which are biological weapons, to become more, mutagenetically or mutagenically paired with other viruses. And basically, this is the biggest cluster of simultaneous biological weapons through multiple transmission vectors that we're seeing the perfect storm. And I believe that perfect storm, doomsday. The word doomsday is a pretty amazing word because it simply means things get out of your hand and out of your control, and it happens in a day. And again, writing about this stuff before it happens, I mean, all the flack I've taken over the years, and I'm not feeling sorry for myself, but I have. Now, what do the people say when they say, look, I've had the time to prepare, and I'll tell everyone they should prepare for self-isolation because it will come to that.
The question is, how long, Stephen? That's the question.
Well,
a week, a month?
Here's the thing that will determine that. The interaction between the chemtrails and all the chemicals. And, there was a Swiss study where they absolutely used qualitative analysis, just took apart molecule by molecule just about all the chemtrail residue. One of the things that happened, and after you and I did a show, the man who, I won't use his name, but contacted me after the show and said, I was contacted by the FBI over these anthrax attacks, saying all that is we have now the issue of how long before, quote, it burns itself out. I'm telling you, George, what troubles me is this, is that up until Marburg showed up in Uganda, there was no hemorrhagic fever. Now, they can call it Marburg, but until I see blood and gore and goo, I don't believe it. Here's the other thing. How do you know the test that they're saying this guy died of Ebola? And see, they're using Ebola as a catchphrase, okay? But I think the ramifications, the political and socio-economic ramifications are what most people don't imagine. For instance, as cities come under more and more infection, people are going to be less likely to go any place, including stores, including hospitals, and people who are in need of serious health care. A lot of people are going to, if they don't get that health care, they're going to be subject to an early departure from the earth, as in dying.
I think we should ban all incoming flights from those areas.
I do too.
All of them.
But George, that should have been done on day one.
Yeah,
right?
absolutely. There should have been a plan.
I've been saying this stuff for 28 years. I said, well, you'd have a real problem then with the book of Revelation, because it was written 2,000 years ago, and now it's coming to pass. That's my story.
One of my guests a couple of days ago asked me, what's your favorite book? I said, it's the Bible. Is there any other?
True, and I think that's what we're seeing right now.
Stay with us. Stephen QUAYLE is with us. We're going to continue chatting with him about some issues, including what's happening with all these sinkholes and giant...